All right. Well, good afternoon. So I'm Adria Van Hoosier. I sit on the EDA board. We're very excited to have you here today for the Business Roundtable for the City of Williamsburg. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for today is Doug Smith. So Doug Smith joined the Hampton Roads Economic Development Alliance as president and CEO in September of 2019. So he oversees the business development, business intelligence, marketing professionals, and leads the operation of the economic development organization that represents 14 municipalities and over 70 private sector investors. And he works closely throughout the state and local governments and the private sector to assist international and domestic companies with investment projects and expansions and relocations in our area. So a lot of really exciting projects that are going around in our area, and he plays a hand in it. And prior to joining the Hampton Roads Economic Development Alliance, Doug was lived and worked in Hampton Roads the majority of his life, being a native of Portsmouth. He was appointed as the city manager for the city of Norfolk in 2017 after serving in the role as interim, and has various public sector been part of various public sectors throughout the Hampton Roads area. In the private sector, Smith served as the president and CEO of Kaufman and Knowles Consulting, where he counseled national and local developers, municipalities, higher education, and corporations, and also began his career in 1985 as a banker. He is a graduate of Norfolk Academy and earned his BA in history from my alma mater, so close to my heart, University of Virginia. And has been engaged in various community organizations as well. And he and his wife, Linda, reside in Norfolk with their 2 children. So we are very, very excited. And if you could just please in the chat, since we're not able to do these in person yet, we will be resuming in person, which we'll talk about at the end, hopefully soon. But if you can just put your name and the business that you're with, just so we can kind of get that pseudo networking on these virtuals as hard as it can be. So with further ado, I'd like to say welcome and thanks for speaking to us today, Doug.
Adria, thank you. And it's certainly a pleasure to be with everybody today. It's I'm sorry I can't see you all, but as I can see, we've got a lot of folks in the participant row here. And I think Adria said this, but if you've got questions, I love questions, right? So throw some questions in the chat. We'll see where this goes. I'm going to do a little screen share here if I can pull this off. Let's see. Bear with me 1 second here. I'm borrowing Yuri's computer. Yeah, I'm striking out here, Yuri. If you could help me, I got all the way over. So Yuri's going to help me get the presentation on the screen here. But what I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about sort of the economic development ecosystem and where I fit in that, where our organization fits, where Yuri's organization fits, and talk to you a little bit about the what we're calling the new alliance. So Adria mentioned that, thank you, that I'm with the Hampton Roads Economic Development Alliance. We actually changed the name to the Hampton Roads Alliance, and so I'll touch on that and what some of that rebranding was all about. And talk to you about really what's guided the organization the last couple of years. We have a couple of agreements. One is a master agreement that was executed and with all of the localities, the 11 original localities, and shortly with the 3 from Williamsburg, York, and James City County. I'm going to talk to you about offshore wind because we think it's a template for all the work that we're doing going forward, and then talk to you about kind of what's next in terms of where we're going as an organization. If you all know this, but it bears repeating. If you think about it, we're sort of a yes and organization. You know, it's not a do you fund the alliance or participate in the alliance, or do you participate with the localities, or do you participate with the chamber or the state? Well, you do all the above, and we work with everybody. But at the state level, we work with obviously the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. We have an event on the 21st of April where the new CEO, Jason L. Kuby, who was just named about 2 weeks ago, is going to be speaking to our investors at the Zyder Theater down in Virginia Beach. So a neat opportunity to spend some time with Jason and That organization was run by Stephen Murray previously, and frankly was a broken organization. It got a fairly damning report from JLARC about some things that they needed to prove, and I would argue today that they're one of the best in the country, and they do a dynamite job, and we work closely with them because of where we're located. We are, a maritime industrial base as a region, and so we do a lot of work with the Port of Virginia. And obviously there's 18 organizations like ours around the Commonwealth, regional economic development organizations. And then we work with the localities that are below. And I'll talk to you a little bit about kind of what that looks like and how we do that. But if you've been like I have, if you've been around here for a while, you know that this frankly was a broken organization. HREDA, the Hampton Roads Economic Development Organization, was following an old model, and I'll touch on that a little bit. We were slow to change that model. And I happened to be, in those days, I was the deputy city manager of Virginia Beach, working for Jim Spoor. Frankly, we recommended to the city council that we leave the alliance. Norfolk followed suit. And frankly, Secretary of Commerce in those days was Maurice Jones, came down to see Will Sessoms and Paul Frame and said, yeah, we're not going to work with 17 or 14 localities. We're going to work with a regional group and try to figure out how to get this thing together. About that time, the communities up here, James City County, Williamsburg, and York, did leave. And so we can talk about sort of why that happened. But I think in its the simplest form, it was the fact that we were chasing this old model of simply business attraction, only going out of market and trying to pull foreign direct investment back into the market, when the rest of the world had figured out that economic development is really an ecosystem. And there's lots of models around that all say about the same thing. I like this one that Brookings does, but the then and now was kind of you were primarily business attraction, a little bit of other stuff that you got involved in. But today, and you all are in business, you know this, it is about, can you provide the talent for the companies that are already in your market and for the companies that you want to attract? How do you create that entrepreneurial culture? We're, as a region, we're a fairly risk-averse culture, and so that entrepreneurial, and I think that comes from a dependence on the military and defense contracting and those sorts of things that I think we're working hard to change that culture, and the 757 Angels and 757 CoLab and some other organizations are doing some really interesting things. The other thing that I think folks, and you'll hear me talk in a minute about at least where we're going with clusters, it's understanding where you have strengths and how you build on those strengths. You can want to be a biohealth hub or a biomedical hub or whatever that is. If you don't have strengths to make that happen already in place, then that's not going to play out. The other key piece here is your growth really comes from existing business. And if you're not in that space, I think you have two problems. One is it's really about growing that 5-person company to a 50-person company to a 500-person company. But it's also, if you want to attract companies from out of market, they want to understand who they're not only competitors, but who they're going to be working with, and how those companies, if you're in the food and beverage industry, you want to know that other food and beverage companies are in that market and doing well. And we need to be able to tell that story and be connected. Without naming names, I called on a company asking them to be an investor in the alliance, and told them a story about another company we recruited and how well that had gone. And at the end, the CEO looked at me and said, "You know what happened when y'all moved that company into town?" He said, "They hired all my people." So he wasn't happy. And so, because we hadn't really done our homework to understand what the implications of bringing that company in and what that industry needed. So again, expansion and retention, critically important. The other piece where I think Virginia has really been lacking and continues to lack, although we've made great improvement, is on site readiness. Do you have, those of you that are in a sales environment, do you have product? And we really didn't have a handle on the development, the developable sites within the region. We spent a good chunk of 2018, 19, really starting to do an analysis of the sites. And now we've looked at every site over 25 acres in Hampton Roads and what it will take to get those sites into the stream of commerce, which is really important. We can talk a lot more about that, but and frankly, I'm getting back into this market. Years ago, I worked for, as Adria said, for First Union, and so I managed branches here in Hampton Roads. We had a branch over here on Waller Mill Road, and but it's been probably 20 years since I've spent any kind of significant time in this market. So getting back in here and understanding what your product is and how we position it is going to be a lot of fun for me. So the organization changed to accommodate that model, and we changed the staff. We've got frankly, a lot of new players. Obviously, I'm in a new role, but probably 7 of the 10 folks in the organization are new to the market. I would highlight Steve Harrison, who is our Vice President of Business Intelligence and Marketing, is a William & Mary grad. And one of the things we've done is we assign a vice president to every community. And so I've assigned Steve to Williamsburg, James City County, and York. So you'll see him he and I'll both be at the Williamsburg EDA meeting tomorrow. You'll see us more and more. You'll see Steve in particular. I mentioned the new model that changed. Our governance was also unwieldy. We had a 70-person board. If you've worked with a 70-person board, you understand the challenges that presents. So today, and frankly, when you get a board that big, people don't really participate, don't really show up, and that's what started to happen as the organization kind of lost its way and got diluted. A lot of the private folks left as well. Today, the board is 13 people. It's 6 mayors, the mayors of the 5 largest communities, and then 1 rotating mayor among those, and then 7 really C-suite executives. So our chair today happens to be Bill Ermatinger, who's the head of HR for Huntington Ingalls, Keith Vandervendt from Ferguson, and you can see the others. I think an interesting one is Diane Leopold, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Dominion Energy. So when Bob Blue became the CEO, she became the COO. So we've got some really strong private support there. In the coming weeks and months, we'll want to have some conversation. What we add to the board each January, we'll want to get somebody from this market on the board. So we'd love to have some conversation with some of you about that. I would argue that collaboration among the regional organizations, higher ed, and the business community is as good as it has ever been. And I'll touch on that again in a minute. And maybe the biggest change we made is I think economic development in this market has really been ceded to the public sector for a long time. And the people that were involved in economic development as volunteers really did it as a sense of civic duty. Which was great. So you have bankers and lawyers and folks that were being helpful. But where economic development really makes a difference is when the people that are involved do so out of their self-interest. They get involved with an industry cluster or an organization that if we do our job well, they're going to make more money. Their business is going to grow. And that's the model that we want to instill in Hampton Roads. So we went from a pretty modest under $500,000 of private funding to over $1.7 million in private funding. We have an agreement that I'll touch on with the cities that matches that funding. We have 8 investors that give us $100,000 each, folks like Town Bank and Huntington Ingalls and the Port Authority and others. And then we switched to we're a 501c3 now, which provides some tax advantages for our investors. Our organization is really guided by 2 documents. One is that master agreement that I mentioned among the localities. So I happened to, Adria mentioned, I was the city manager in Norfolk, really when we were relaunching the organization, and about 5 city managers and 5 business leaders got together and negotiated this master agreement that really lays out exactly what the Alliance is going to do, how it's going to match up with that model we talked about, and how it's going to be funded. So it took a lot of the uncertainty out of the relationships with local government, and also let the private investors know that there would be public money to match the money that they were bringing in. My predecessor was a guy named Steve Herbert, who was the interim CEO. But before him, a guy named Rick Weddle ran the organization. Rick was very sharp, was a true economic development professional, and had worked in Orlando and the Triangle and other markets. Came here and brought in the IBM site consulting team to do a study of the organization and of the region. And that's who really came in and said, hey, you guys you're chasing an old model. You've got to really change the organization. There's a lot. It's really well done report. There were 4 big takeaways from that report: that the alliance needed to be more involved, needed to be more of a regional leader as an organization. That we needed to be more directed in how we went after our business traction efforts, and identified target industries. And I would tell you, we've taken those target industries a little further today. And then I'm going to tell you a challenge that we continue to have as a region is we have not branded this region. We the Alliance, are tasked with promoting the region to prospects. We're doing, I think I'll show you some fun things that we're doing, but a conversation this region has really got to have is how and when will we put together a true regional branding exercise that's funded to the tune of $2 or $3 million a year and is done consistently, and we can talk about that. I would argue that we'll never know if Hampton Roads was a good name or not because we didn't spend 50 cents trying to market it. So it doesn't matter what you call us if you don't figure out how to promote that. You're not going to be successful. And then a piece that Yuri and I were talking about this a few minutes ago. I think one of the big advantages for the 3 communities that just came back in is the market intelligence work that we bring and some of the software models that we have, and it really allows the locals to leverage us, to think of us as part of their team to do research for you. And it can be on the target industries. And we talked to Yuri a few minutes ago about while we're not in the retail space, all of us have been in local economic development offices. We've all been out to the International Shopping Center Conference out in Vegas. We've done research, so we can do research to support these cities even beyond our core activities. So I'll run you through these headlines real quick, and of just kind of what we've accomplished among those. I saw Benny Zhang sent me a text saying, hey, he saw me on the agenda for today. Benny was one of the folks from up here that was real involved in this 757 Recovery and Resilience Action Framework. And I'm going to show a slide on that in a little bit of detail. The narrative that the region doesn't collaborate really is an old narrative, and there's no better way to exemplify that than the $5 billion worth of transportation projects that are underway. But the work that got done to prioritize those transportation projects, to prioritize regional resilience projects, broadband, the port, really allowed us and our organization and Reinvent Hampton Roads got real involved in interacting with Senator Kane, Senator Warner, with something we call the Hampton Roads Infrastructure Coalition, to make sure that as federal money was starting to be talked about for infrastructure, that they knew or know now what our priorities are. We were truly the only region that went to the 2 of them with a set of priority projects in every category to explain to them what had regional support. Obviously, the return of these communities has been a tremendous benefit in terms of really that regional collaboration. And this is an interesting one. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline was the natural gas pipeline that was going to come into the region and really bring us the meats. We don't have enough natural gas coming into this region. There's 139 sites in Virginia that were identified as dependent upon that pipeline for growth and development for industrial projects. Over 50 of those sites are in Hampton Roads. When that project went away, it really created a challenge for us. And so we got a Go Virginia grant and have hired a group called PA Consulting out of Denver that's doing an analysis of what the energy is that's coming into the region, what the different sources are, what's going to be needed in the coming years, and then what are the portfolio of solutions going to be to meet that challenge. I would argue that as big an issue as talent is for economic development. Right on the heels of that is energy, and certainly what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine is really highlighting the vulnerability of those systems. And so, understanding what our role in renewable energy is going to be and what our chances of making that happen is going to be, I think, really interesting. I mentioned this framework. So when Governor Northam sent us all home that March and said you can't come back till June, and we thought we'd never last the 10 weeks or whatever that was, little did we know it'd be a couple of years. A group of us that included different chambers of commerce, the Old Dominion University, Norfolk State, the two deans of the business school there, Reinvent Hampton Roads, Workforce Council, started talking every other day on the phone about how are we going to get reopened. And what we've realized pretty quickly was the governor and the city managers and mayors were going to figure out what that was going to look like, but somebody needed to have an eye on the regional economy and how the economy would bounce back quicker and become more resilient. And if you think about the Great Recession, we were slow to come back. Most regions, even the rest of the Commonwealth, recovered in about 70 months. Hampton Roads took 100 months to recover. And so how would we make sure that didn't happen again? This time, we had about 150 people or so that got on 11 committees, everything from target industries to placemaking to health and wellness, and developed this 757 framework. So the full name is the 757 Recovery and Resilience Action Framework. You'll see on the left side are the values that have been identified through some work at the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission about what we value as a region, everything from innovation and creativity to our coastal lifestyle to military presence. But then what are the pillars of this growth going to look like? And the pillars are regional unity. We've really got to create some pride in the region and some ownership in the region for people, for our citizens. But it's growing jobs, it's attracting and retaining talent. It's growing resiliency really means business resiliency, making sure the economy is more resilient, and then advancing infrastructure. There's 30 programs within each of those boxes. I can spend another hour explaining what all happened here. There's 3 or 4 takeaways I want you to have. For the first time, there is a regional vision for the regional economy. The short version is what's at the bottom there, 757 = 1, economic empowerment and growth for all. But there's also, unlike most of the strategic plans we've done, there is both accountability and transparency with this. So every one of those programs has an organization that's responsible for implementation and is also responsible for reporting out the results. So if you go to 757framework.com, there's a website there that shows literally all these programs, how we're working on those programs, and how we're progressing. There's a green check that we've done the work. There's a yellow check that says we're working on it, or a red check that says we haven't made progress. And there's a set of priorities that are broken down by year. This is a 36-month plan to try and make sure that we bounce back more quickly. Happy to talk about that more later. The second initiative was really our core business, which is that target industry development. And we've done a lot of work to figure out what to take those target industries that IBM gave us and go a little bit deeper. I would tell you that we don't get our fair share of office leads from the state. And I'll tell you this to Jason if he's on the call. The easy play is Northern Virginia, and they will tell you that most people that are looking at the state come in and say, hey, I want to go to Northern Virginia. What we're trying to show with this office market study was we've got a lot of product here that we think is really, really attractive. They gave us some target industries. 2 weeks ago, we brought in about a dozen office brokers to test that study. And, the world changed, and remote work and office space is going to look really different. I'm not sure that study's even relevant anymore. And the room kind of gave us that feedback. So they've agreed to work with us on a quarterly basis to really talk through how we implement that study. We had 3 different firms handling lead generation for us. It was kind of all over the board. We were paying a lot of money and not getting a lot of impact. And we consolidated that to one group, PM&P, out of Frankfurt, who has offices in Denver and Chicago, and they're doing a dynamite job for us. We hired Toy Hunter from the state of Virginia, who's working for VEDP. We hired Nicole Riff, who was running really most of the economic development programs in the governor's office in Texas. So we brought some real stars in, and then you can see the other studies that we've done, one on robotics, and I've touched more on offshore wind, and have ramped up this business retention and expansion, really scale up, and just really how do we identify those companies that can grow dramatically. So lead generation, I'm really pleased with the work that PM&P has done. This takes a while to start to get momentum. And unfortunately, for the last 2 years, we really haven't been able to travel much. Our folks are on the road a lot more in the last 30 days, and we have a really robust calendar for this year. But we were fortunate to have the PM&P team in Europe to be able to keep us front and center with some of the prospects that we've been working with. At the end of the day, we the Alliance do not close a deal, right? The localities close those deals. We try to identify opportunities. We try to bring in, we try to collaborate. But the best thing we can do is fill that sales funnel to bring projects and opportunities into the localities. This just gives you the pipeline. You can see on the right side are the target industries that IBM had identified. You can see sort of 20 and 21, the numbers for the 5 don't change a whole lot, but what's different is a 57 projects on offshore wind. Offshore wind is a generational opportunity for this region. We believe you can generate 5,000 to 6,000 jobs to support that industry. There's going to be $80 to $100 billion of investment off of the East Coast, and we have gone in a big way there, and we're happy to talk about that in some detail. This just is a little clearer picture of the projects and kind of highlights that point of kind of where these things are coming from. Food and beverage processing is obviously been a successful one for us over the years and continues to be. And we were making some calls up in James City County earlier to sort of better understand that market up here. I worry distribution and logistics is who we are in many ways. What we've seen in the region is we have very little industrial property left, about 1% vacancy, and that 1% is obsolete buildings. I worry a little bit that we're not doing enough value-added activities with what's coming through the port, and so we'll continue to have some conversation. I think one of the things you'll see us do is develop a very specific industrial development strategy as opposed to a site readiness strategy. We're still shaping what business retention and expansion looks like, and I think that's a place where we're going to be able to help the 3 communities up here really add value to the companies that already exist here, and how to help those companies grow and by providing some of the data. And we again called on a company here last week, and they've got some connectivity in Spain, and so our folks were in Spain, and so we're doing some outreach on their behalf already. And I know offshore wind will not be as specific for these markets, but I tell you this more as an example of how we think we will apply this discipline to other industry sectors. We opened up an offshore wind landing, called it a co-working space, that now has 20 national and international companies as members. We did a supply chain study. You know, it's an industry that doesn't exist in America. And so you had to understand, what does the supply chain look like from when you start surveying the ocean to operations and maintenance of those turbines, and what are all the pieces that are needed. And then we surveyed dozens of local companies to find out if they'd be willing to get into the supply chain there. And obviously we've been to trade shows and whatnot, and had a VIP weekend for those 20 companies last summer, and then went to the General Assembly looking for financial support to help some of the existing Hampton Roads companies transition into that supply chain. And we can talk about that maybe during the Q&A. I mentioned this piece about promoting the region, and we're doing that. But I got to tell you, folks, it's a fairly small scale. You know, we have a little under a $4 million budget to do everything we do. We can't have a meaningful regional branding, regional marketing program. So we try to be really targeted with social media and a lot of geofencing, and making sure that what we weren't doing is we weren't on social media in the markets we were visiting before. So we're really trying to connect our lead generation and our marketing activities and our travel in a much more direct way. We had been using a national firm that frankly I didn't think was being as effective as they could be. So we hired a local firm called Sway that I think has really done some good work for us. And right now we're playing off of this off of the name of Hampton Roads Alliance with this idea of every business needs an ally. And you can see over here what some of the impressions. So we're being effective. We've got work still to do, but we've really come a long way with social media. Doing a lot with video now. And then the final topic was this idea of business intelligence and how do you add value to the process. And I told you we did a lot of work around site readiness. We've done for our board, a lot of review of the work that our organizations are doing, the cultures that are being developed around diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think I mentioned this study, the Mangum study, really looked at offshore wind to tell us what the economic impact of that could be for the region. I mentioned that Wadley Donovan study. And then I'd also mentioned the regional energy assessment. I think that's going to be we're going to get that back in mid-May. And I think that's going to tell us a lot about where we're going to need to be going relative to energy. For example, I worry, frankly, that I don't know that solar is the right play for some of the markets we're bringing it into in Hampton Roads. I worry that we're taking what could be good industrial property and taking it off the development role for 30 years. And is that right? I don't know, but let's have a conscious decision and conversation about that. And you can see the kind of business intelligence assists that we've done for the localities to try to provide them information. So I wrap up. I got 2 more slides. It says to just say we're a different organization with a different mission, a new leadership, new staffing, new funding, all memorialized in these master agreements. We frankly have implemented the recommendations from that 2018 IBM study. So we're putting a little bit of a flag in the ground and declaring victory and moving not away from that, but beyond that. I believe we're regionally relevant in a way that we were not, and yet we're positioned to do a great deal more. And there's plenty of improvement still ahead for us. Again, I think offshore wind presents that generational opportunity for the region, but also that template for how we can look at other industries like unmanned systems, like cyber and robotics. So I was at an event in Florence. If you know Florence Kingston, who's the Newport News Economic Development Director, she said, "Doug, love what you guys done with the organization. Think you've done cool stuff with offshore wind, but what's next?" Which is a great question. And so the what's next is really staying on those 4 buckets and continuing to facilitate that 757 framework. We took the lead on that because we couldn't travel, so we were able to spend a little bit of money, of our travel money, on that. We had the capacity to lead that program. But now we want to look at the work that we put forward in the Regions Build Back Better Regional Challenge grant application to really build on the maritime industrial base here, which is really about maritime innovation. I think we got to do some more work on our clusters. I think data sciences is a strong play for us, particularly if Jefferson Lab gets their supercomputer. Unmanned systems, I would have told you that it's the marine is the big play. And you saw some interesting stuff happen with Huntington Ingalls, and I think marine is where aerial was 15 years ago. But we've got some interesting things happening in the region around aerial, and those are industries that cut across all of the other industries. They'll use them, including cybersecurity and renewable energy. Obviously, we will continue to get the businesses that are involved in those clusters engaged with us and helping us. We'll continue to promote the region and continue to provide the market intelligence support that we give to the localities. So Adria, that's about 30 minutes, and I hope you got some questions in the chat, which I'm certainly happy to answer, but I'm going to stop my share there. There we go. Adria, I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yep, absolutely.
I just said something epic and you all missed it. I'm just kidding. But thank you for that very insightful presentation. I think it was really great to be able to hear kind of the new shift within the alliance and what the focuses are, and kind of where we can play into that. So there are a couple questions in the box, well, one in particular. So it's from Rick Overy, and it is, what specifically are the opportunities for Williamsburg that the alliance could help with?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and frankly, we're still learning that. And so I think it is a little bit of what I mentioned, trying to understand where you all want to go, right? So we're coming up and talking to the EDA tomorrow. I happen to have a conversation with a tech company that is out of market right now that's looking at coming to Williamsburg. And so we had coffee this morning to talk about what that might look like. And we've talked to, was a William & Mary grad. And so I've talked to a couple of folks on the EDA that talk about, how do we bring some of those William & Mary folks that have had a lot of success back into Williamsburg, and what might that look like? And Yuri and I've talked about, obviously retail and tourism will continue to be a big play for you all. That's not what we do. But I think we can support you from a business intelligence perspective. So part of what we've got to understand is what's your vision? What do you see? We've spent some time. Andrew Trivett's been tremendous. I didn't have a deep relationship with him before this because we didn't cross over for very long. But I'm real impressed with him and what he's trying to do. And so we've spent some time with Catherine Rowe, a little bit of time with Cliff Fleet, trying to understand kind of how all those folks work together and what that long-term vision is. And once we have a better handle on that, then we'll go target specific industry types. But I'd love to hear, this is one of the things, I told you about that broker roundtable last week, and just sort of laid our cards on the table. I don't know if this study is still valid. And one of the brokers looked over and he said, Doug, I think this is a group you want to instill confidence in, not that you don't have confidence in your plan. I said, listen, we don't have all the answers, and we're going to be real transparent about the things where we need help. And we're not coming in here saying we've got everything solved for Williamsburg. So I'd love to hear, not today's great, but in the coming weeks, what you all are looking for, and then we'll figure out how to support that.
So a couple other things came up in the chat. One's just singing your praises. So that was Benny saying, just saying that spectacular folks, and you're turning around the Hampton Roads Alliance from the previous Heretta. And then the other one was just asking about a copy of the slides. I know we are recording this presentation as well, so it will be up on the website. So that will be available. And I don't know, Yuri or Joanna, if the slides will also be made available.
Yes, we can definitely add the slides as well. Not a problem.
And I'd encourage you to go to our website, hamptonroadsalliance.com. It's good, detailed information out there. I'd encourage you to go to that 757 framework. There's good information there with a dashboard that talks about how we're doing. So we are trying to be very transparent with the work that we're undertaking.
Are there any other questions for Doug? Anything from particular businesses or around any of the pillars that he talked about, with like the expansion and retention, the clusters and innovation, any of those? Oh, there's just one. So Drew said, can you talk a little bit more about the Alliance can augment the resources and reach the Williamsburg Economic Development Authority effort?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have two young men that are really sharp, Jonathan Holman and Steve Harrison that I mentioned. They have the ability, so if as the EDA is thinking through whatever it is, I'm going to make this up. You're looking at William & Mary, and William & Mary is trying to figure out how to get in the data sciences space, and how do we support that? That we can do the research on whatever the topic is between our organization, access to the Planning District Commission, and others. We've got a lot of tools that we can bring to bring that to bear, that keeps Yuri and her team, which is small, right? She doesn't have time to do that. So that 176 assists I showed you was everything from helping with some of the demographic information on the Farm Fresh in Pocosin, to doing a deep dive on offshore wind and trying to help a particular company understand the workforce that's coming. We've got a big company coming into market right now that will need a lot of people, and they don't know if they've got enough if we have enough of the kind of talent that they need. So we will work with Sean Avery and the Workforce Council, and we will identify sort of where those people are, the kinds of degrees that have been generated these last few years, and try to make the case that we can, provide those employees, but let's call it what it is. We have 3.5% unemployment. So I didn't like, you got a bunch of people sitting around looking for these jobs. So we got to also be able to show how we can train people or upskill folks. We have two advantages that I don't think we've leveraged enough. One is order of magnitude, 15,000 exiting military and their spouses. And so those are talented folks, but we've got to get their skills lined up with certifications that will apply to the private sector when they get out. And so Sean and his team are doing a lot of heavy lifting, good work there. And then on a given day, we've got 130,000 college students, right? And so we meaning the region, not our organization, stood up something called Campus 757, which is really aimed at helping those kids get internships, ultimately get jobs, but keeping them here in Hampton Roads. So to sort of circle back to the question, whatever the topic is that the EDA and the city are trying to better understand, we can help do some of that research that y'all might not have the capacity to do.
And just to clarify, that would just be connecting back to the website, and the businesses could be able to get some of those resources.
No, actually, it's really, I think, so part of why Steve's going to be coming to your EDA meetings and those sorts of things is so you've got that relationship. It's really, Adria, Yuri calling up Steve.
Go to the local EDA.
Saying, hey, I've got this particular thing I'm trying to figure out. We've got a small cyber company that's looking to expand. We can't figure out if there are enough degrees here, enough of those type of folks. Can you do a little bit of research for me and give me a quick little white paper on it? It's that kind of, so yes, we've got some stuff on the website. That's really, if you want general economic information, it's better to go to the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission to do that. But they do have that kind of information posted, or the universities. But ours is really much more targeted research for a specific need.
Okay. There's another question, Benny. Benny Zhang asked, can you touch on the 757 champions and how Greater Williamsburg local businesses and active citizens get involved as part of the regional effort?
Benny, you're good. Thank you. I should have said that. So one of the things that came out of sort of all this analysis, a couple of things before COVID, Reinvent Hampton Roads and some others did a branding exercise to really understand, what are we, who are we as a region, what should we be called? And part of what came out of that was that there just wasn't a lot of regional pride and a lot of regional unity and a lot of regional awareness. And so we've stood up a lot of different programs, but part of what we wanted to come out of that 757 framework was we wanted champions, people that would get engaged in that process, be involved. I just believe if you're engaged and informed, you tend to have, you take ownership. And so we started the 757 Champions program, and we've got almost 800 people that have signed up. And really what all you're saying right now is, I'll be a little bit of the choir. I'll pay attention to what's going on with the framework. I'll tell the story. But what we really want is, as we start rolling programs out, particularly in that resilience bucket, and we've got frankly Norfolk State and Old Dominion are standing some programs up for businesses for around your improving your business model, around how do you create a culture that embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we want companies to actually go in and take some of those courses, which you can go to our website and you'll see if you go to that 757 framework, there's a button on the very first page that says 757 Champion, and you just push that button, sign up. And what happens is that will also put you on there's a newsletter that we put out on about every 6 weeks of just what's going on with the framework, and so it gets you sort of looped in. So thank you, Benny. Did I answer the whole question, Adrian? 757 Champions, wasn't it? Is there something else?
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks.
Benny, feel free to chime in the chat if you have any additional questions. Those are all the questions that are in the chat right now. Does anyone have any additional questions for Doug? All right. Well, again, Doug, thank you so much for that very insightful presentation. It's always great to hear kind of what's going on in the broader region, but then also how can we connect back to the local area. So really do appreciate you walking us through that.
Thank you.
So we did mention at the beginning.
I would just tell you, communication is everything. I think where we get in trouble sometimes is when folks don't know what we're up to. So if you've got an organization you want us to come talk to, if you're ever feeling like you don't know what we're up to, just let us call us, and we'd be happy to come out and talk or pick up the phone and call me. So thank you, Adria.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for volunteering to do that. So as we mentioned at the beginning, I think the next two, we did send out the survey for how to resume the roundtables, whether in person, virtual, or combination. It sounds like the request is to keep some version of both. So both I don't know if I might be stealing Yuri's thunder, but so the next two we're going to keep virtual, just given some of the kind of what we already have set up with the speakers. And then our goal is, so July, we would do a combination. We are also having to wait on the room availability, which would be Stryker, that will allow us to do that combination of both virtual and in person. That does not work very well with the IT setup in the community building where we used to hold these. So I'm going to hand it off to Yuri for the EDA minute, and I have a feeling I stole some of her thunder, so I apologize, Yuri. But
no thunder stolen. Don't worry, Adria. So I just want to say first, thank you so much to Doug for that excellent presentation. I personally have been really impressed over the last couple of months. We've been part of the Alliance again since December 1st of last year, and in just these few months, his team has done a really excellent job of making sure that they are well integrating Greater Williamsburg into the fold of the Alliance, and doing really everything they can to support our mission while staying in line with their own. So much appreciation to Doug and his team. One thing I wanted to mention is the Business Appreciation Award nominations are now open. So annually, our Williamsburg Economic Development Authority recognizes a business that makes Williamsburg a great place to live and work and do business. So if you know of a business that you would like to nominate, and self-nominations are accepted, you can do that at yeswilliamsburg.com/business award. As Adria mentioned, the next two roundtables will be virtual, but we are trying to explore a hybrid component for the July roundtable. So the hope is that we will be able to host that in person with lunch again. So we'll be able to get back together and have those really valuable networking conversations. But that if you aren't able to attend in person, there will be a virtual component so that you can tune in and still see the great speakers. So in May, we do have Vicki Simino, the CEO of the Williamsburg Tourism Council, coming to speak. She'll be giving an update on all things Tourism Council. Just a note that the date has been changed from our normal second Tuesday. So that's going to be happening on Thursday, May 12th. And then we're going to have our Commissioner of Revenue, Laura Overy, come and speak at the June roundtable. Registrations are open for both of those at yeswilliamsburg.com/roundtable. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is we did do the Business Roundtable survey over the last month. Thank you to everyone who provided feedback. We have combed through those responses. Really great suggestions for future speakers. So many thanks to everyone who took the time to respond. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Adria.
all right. Well, it looks like there's one more thing that popped up in the chat, just checking it. So I was just saying many thanks to Doug, a really good discussion, and appreciate your leadership. So I agree with those sentiments, and just wanted to encourage you to attend the next two roundtables. I think they're going to be really great presentations that will be really good for local businesses to hear. So otherwise, I hope that you make it a wonderful day to do business in Williamsburg, and appreciate you joining today.